Welcome to this video, which is about mobile learning. Now, when I say mobile learning, I'm referring to activities or perhaps tools that you can use through maybe 3 different types of device. Firstly, the tablet. Probably the most famous tablet at the moment is the iPad, but there are many of them available. Secondly, this is what we call a feature phone. And these are less popular than they were many years ago, say 5 years ago, because of the increasing importance of this, which is the smartphone. A smartphone is a phone which has a touchscreen, and they are, as you've probably seen, increasingly popular not only with the public in general, but also with young people and probably the kids who are in your class. While tablets are increasingly popular and widely available, it's the smartphone which is most ubiquitous at the moment, I think. In this video, I'm going to focus mainly on tips related to using a smartphone. However, a lot of them can also relate to tablets and even PCs and laptops. Why is mobile learning important? Well, using these kind of devices allows you to make the most of collaborative tools, of ebooks, of course the internet, which you can access from many smartphones these days, and a whole host of activities that you can do on apps or even on special websites which are designed just for mobile learning. I think as a teacher it's very, very important to think about how you can incorporate mobile learning into your classes, and in particular thinking about these smartphones that probably many of your learners will have. One thing which I'm going to repeat not only in this video but throughout the series is the importance of monitoring how many of your learners in each class have smartphones, or perhaps even a feature phone. And of those who have smartphones, how many of them can access the internet? Understanding this and knowing this information is really useful for you when you're planning how you want to use them. Now, if I think back perhaps 5 or 10 years ago, I remember when I was teaching, I hated it when there were telephones in the classroom. And I think today some teachers still think that learners should switch off their phones. Do you think they should? I'm not so sure anymore. I think it's a great learning resource, a great tool to use, and it would be a shame to not make the most of it. However, you have to think about having rules in place before you use something which is as powerful as a smartphone in your class. So do have a look at the video in this series about digital literacy, which gives you some ideas about how to set up class rules. As I mentioned a minute ago, remember as well to check who has and who doesn't have a phone or a smartphone in your classes, because you really want this to be an inclusive experience and you don't want to exclude any of the learners in your classes. So let's have a look at some tips about how you can use mobile learning or smartphones in your classes. My first tip is to use simple features on the phones. These are features which might actually appear on feature phones. Remember, feature phones are these, the older types. These features are, for example, the calendar. Now this seems very simple and unnecessary, but it can be a nice way to get learners used to using a mobile phone in your classes. It's also a good way for you to get used to using or allowing your learners to use them in the class too. Just get your learners to note down homework on their phone's calendar. Most phones will have one, but you should check before you do this. The second feature you can use, which is common across smartphones and many feature phones, is the camera. The camera is probably the most useful function on the phone for you as a teacher, and definitely for the learners. Get them to take a photo of it, and perhaps they can refer to it for revision, or even as a continuation of a project that it was part of. Secondly, you can use not the camera but the photos that your learners have taken on their phone's camera to personalize learning activities. So rather than just asking your learners to imagine a character to ask and answer questions about, they can find a friend or a member of their family on their phone on a photo, and then they can talk about that person. You can personalize activities in lots of different ways by referring to photos on your learner's camera. Again, do check that they're comfortable with doing this, because some learners at some ages might not be too happy to share what's on their phone's camera. However, most will be. Another good way to use the camera is to set homework exercises with it. So, you might get them to do a Sunday story. A Sunday story is where they take photos throughout the day with their camera, and then in the next lesson after that Sunday they tell the story of their day to their partner or to their group, going through the photos that they took. Of course, this can be extended so they can write up their whole experience on that Sunday as well. If you want to know more about that, you can find details on the information sheet for this video. The calendar and the camera are very, very useful tools. We also have usually as well a voice recorder. And of course there are lots of things you can do with a voice recorder. You can look for more details on the information sheet, but just to give you some quick examples, you can do best voice activities where learners try to speak their best English and compare themselves with their friends. Or you can do perhaps the parrot game. The parrot game is when you actually mimic or try to copy a native speaker or another speaker of English and produce exactly what they say with the same tone, the same intonation, and so on. It's very simple to do. If the learners, or even just a handful of learners in your group, have a voice recorder, then they can record what they're saying and play it back to somebody else in their group or to you as well to listen to. So far I've just talked about tools on phones which are not really that new or exciting. They've been there for many years, but we don't use them that much. The camera, the calendar, the voice recorder. What really makes smartphones different now, I think, are the apps. Apps is short for applications. And if you have a smartphone, you can download different applications or store them on the phone. What kind of applications can you get? Well, Oxford University Press has a range of apps to help learners, and also some which will help you as a teacher. If you have a look at the information sheet, you can find out more details and some links to those apps. There are also other apps which can be really useful for learners. These can change with time, they come and go, but you might want to check out Anki, which is a flashcard app. Also an app called Evernote, which is very good for organising work, which might be useful for older learners. We've seen apps and we've seen the simple tools on phones. Of course as well, most smartphones these days will have a connection to the internet. Now that might be through Wi-Fi in your school, if you're lucky, or it might be through 3G or 4G, that is through the normal telephone network. Again, it's something to check with your learners. As you've probably seen during this series of videos, I'm really in favour of letting learners discover things or find out answers themselves. And using their phone to Google something or to search for information is an excellent way of letting them develop that skill, because it is a skill for them to be comfortable doing that kind of research. You also need to be comfortable about them doing it as well, so don't forget those class rules. Finally, ebooks are also widely available to access on mobile phones. There's another video in this series about ebooks, so I won't go into detail here, but of course you can find out a bit more on the information sheet for this video too. Okay, I hope you found this useful. Remember, most of what I've talked about has been related directly to a smartphone, but it could equally apply to a tablet as well, and in some cases to laptops and PCs. So I hope you have found it useful, and I hope you'll feel more comfortable about using mobile phones in your classes.